In University City, a woman steps into the bright sunshine to read some rather dark information. Cissy Lacks, a veteran English teacher, is reading a statement from her most recent employer, the Ferguson-Florissant School District. It's a statement telling her she's been fired. By now, you're probably familiar with her story. The board's action comes after Lacks allowed students in her high school creative writing class to use profanity in a class project. The ensuing controversy has made national news. Locally, it is sparking a community-wide debate on questions of education standards, style, and censorship. Good morning, I'm Steve Jankowski. If you've been reading the letters to the editor section of the Post-Dispatch over the last few weeks, then you know the Cissy Lacks story is hitting a nerve. Her supporters feel she's being attacked by critics who don't understand the realities of today's classroom and today's society. Her opponents feel her teaching methods represent much of what is wrong with education in America today. During the next half hour, we'll examine both sides of the debate over the use of profanity in the classroom. I'll be joined by Cissy Lacks here in the studio. She'll explain why she believes her teaching methods are correct and address several of the criticisms leveled against her. It's sure to be an interesting discussion, and it's coming up next in this week's edition of Newsmakers. Welcome back to Newsmakers. Today we're taking some time to look at some of the issues raised by the recent case of former Berkeley High School teacher Dr. Cissy Lacks. Lacks was recently the subject of several nights of public hearings held by the Ferguson-Florissant School Board. In a trial-like setting, she was questioned about her allowing students to use profanity in a creative writing project last October. For the project, students wrote plays and videotaped their performances. The board said Lacks violated district policy by allowing the language. Lacks argued that the policy was vague and that the students needed to be allowed freedom of expression. In a key exchange, the school district's attorney asked Lacks if she regretted letting the students use profanity.
Do you have any reservations about what has occurred, the fact that so much profanity was used in these tapes?
I don't understand what you mean by the word reservations.
Do you have any remorse?
No.
Do you feel apologetic at all?
No.
You believe you have done absolutely nothing wrong?
Correct.
According to board members who have spoken to News 4, it was responses like that which led them to terminate Dr. Lacks. News 4's Jonathan Clark has more on that decision.
The first round of Cissy Lacks' lengthy fight with the Ferguson-Florissant School District ended here at the St. Anne Unemployment Office. An official notice from the Board of Education confirmed her termination.
It's a devastating message to me that from now on, a teacher, if you want to be mediocre and do nothing, you're probably not going to get in trouble.
In October, Lacks allowed students to use profanity in a creative writing project seen in this videotape. 3 months later, the tape got out and Lacks got in trouble with the board. Last night, the board voted 5-2 in favor of firing the teacher.
The division was on whether or not the teacher should be terminated.
Boyle says all board members agreed the tape was, in his words, vile. But Lacks says the issue is freedom of speech. Plus, there are other issues like fair warning and tenure violations Lacks says she'll pursue in court. And she argues the policies the board claims she, quote, failed to obey pertain to students, not teachers.
Even though it's the student discipline code, she is also supposed to follow it.
Word of the firing tore through Berkeley High.
I don't think it's cool what they did to her, you know. They just suspended her. She shouldn't have been fired. She was a good teacher.
In creative writing, you're supposed to say what you think, and I think that you shouldn't suspend a teacher. That's really good.
I think the board's decision is what's profane here.
Now, the battle between Cissy Lacks and the Ferguson-Florissant School Board is not over. She is promising to take this matter to court. And joining me now to talk more about that and the issues of education standards, style, and censorship is Dr. Cissy Lacks. And Cissy, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Let's talk about, you are now out of a job. For 21 years you've taught English. You're
That's
now
right.
unemployed. What is next for you?
Well, next is the court case, or court cases. That takes some time. I'm not sure exactly what the procedure is. Next is me looking for a job. I want one that's interesting and challenging, that deals with education and students. I haven't at all given up teaching or doing the kinds of things I do. I think it's really important, and it works, and I like working with students.
That leads me to this question. Has this shaken your faith in the system that you have been involved with for more than 20 years?
It has shaken my faith in the system, in the Ferguson-Florissant school system. I hope not in the public school system. I'm a firm believer in public schools. I think it's what helps us and what allows students to have opportunities. But teachers have to know that they go in not scared, that they go in doing the best for their students and not being afraid all the time. So without question, if I were back in that system, for example, knowing what happened to me, I'd be really worried about what's going on in the classroom. If students and teachers are doing anything together, or they're just playing scared most of the time together.
Do you hope to get your job back with Ferguson Florissant, or is that even not in the question?
Well, that's what we're suing for, reinstatement of the position.
Would you take that,
I would take that.
given everything that's happened?
Would be difficult, wouldn't it, to go back. I would believe that I would go back with people knowing what was right and what was wrong and how teachers should teach, and I would be teaching the way that I think is important for my students.
Now, you were asked point blank by Mr. Sussman, the attorney for the district, if you felt any remorse or regrets at what you had done. You said no.
That's right.
Why do you not feel
Not only I feel more than not remorse. I thought that was such an inappropriate question and a lack of recognition on his part of what's important to teachers and students. I told him before and other people that there's a really significant reason why a teacher in my situation would never apologize. It would mean that everything I had done for 20 years was unimportant, insignificant, and that I recognized that it didn't work and wasn't the best way to reach students, when I think it absolutely is. But not only that, it would affect my students, who would no longer trust me and trust teachers when they tell them what is important and what you do to get to be a good writer. And teachers would also be afraid of everything that's going on. So I thought that that question showed a real lack of understanding about what happens in a classroom.
Now, what happened in October in the career or history of Cissy Lacks was not the first chapter, not the first such incident involving students using language or participating in a project like this. Let's talk a little bit about your history in terms of this method.
20 years of history with the same method. It's not using a certain kind of word. It's that student writing, in creative writing, will not be censored. It means that when they start, they have a voice and they know that that voice is important. Now, the rules are, and people can break them, of course, that what they're doing, but I don't think they do, that what they're doing is important. And when they take on that role of a writer, they have to be serious and honest and reflect what is important to them or to the characters in that particular piece of writing. I have never seen a student not do that, to tell you the truth. The students, for example, in this play were very serious about what they were doing. You have to look at the play just to know how they were following the script. They were angry with someone when somebody didn't do what was supposed to be in the script. The same has been true for 20 years. But the other thing that I found that's really important for people to know is that once students begin to write something and recognize that they have a voice, they very quickly change the way that they write. Their idea of what is effective as teenagers changes to what might be effective for everybody else to read. So some words that might be profanity, but it's not always profanity, sometimes it's a simple slang word that they use, changes, and they become more metaphorical, they become more poignant, they become more sensitive in their own writing. The key is that they know when they do it that it's appropriate to the characters they're creating. And I have yet to see a student who doesn't understand that concept and take the charge really seriously.
And you feel that the students have then advanced beyond that point in your instruction?
Oh, without question. I have a couple of poems. I'll show you one of the poems that a student wrote after he wrote, with some profanities that usually represent anger on the part of a student, not always, but you know, often do, to what he moved to later on that was so moving that it won so many awards. I don't understand how anybody could say, stop this student in the first place so that that student can't get to the second place. That's the craziness that I don't understand. Why do you want to do that to somebody? Tell them that what they did was bad and horrible and don't do it again, and then what you're really saying to them is, you're not going to have an opportunity to get to the second place because I'm not going to even let you go through the first one.
And there are, of course, other issues involved here that we need to talk about. We'll be doing more of that, in fact. And coming up, we'll take a closer look at the arguments of those who say Cissy Lacks is wrong in letting her students use profanity in the classroom. We'll examine their arguments and hear what Cissy has to say about them. When Newsmakers continues in just a minute. Back once again to Newsmakers. We're visiting with Dr. Cissy Lacks, the former English teacher who was recently fired for allowing her students to use profanity in the classroom. As we saw in the previous segment, Lacks has many supporters who agree with her teaching methods. However, there are also many who disagree. The president of the Ferguson Florissant School Board says that for allowing students to use profanity is a violation of community standards.
She did not follow the expectations of our school district. We have high expectations for our students. And profanity and the profanity in the videos did not meet those expectations. We are elected officials for the community, and the community's values are not those that were shown in the video.
Now, Cissy Lacks is here in the studio with me now, and Cissy, this took the issue in a broader sense from the school, from a single classroom of Berkeley High School into the whole community. How do you react to that statement, comparing what you were doing in class to the community values in Ferguson Florissant?
Well, the community values that we've seen are the ones that of my supporters and of people talking, I mean, and what happened at the hearing. And as far as I can tell, most people understood what was happening. They wanted students to have an opportunity to have a voice. They understood that there are a lot of different students in the area, and they want them all to get a chance. So it's really interesting to know what is community values, because the only thing we saw basically was support of my position and a clear understanding of what makes a good teacher. I didn't see the other side. In fact, we saw a press release where they said that they also understood that most of the people who were there were our supporters, and they didn't find it appropriate to have people come to a public hearing. We think it's public education. We think we've heard from people, and that clearly the majority, and more than the majority, support this position. But I think next year, it's too late for this year, but next year they'll be able to tell in school board elections what effect this has on the community.
So you think there'll be a stronger voice for values spoken then?
I think there'll be a stronger voice for people supporting teachers and supporting good education. We know several people who said that they're going to run for the school board next year. It was too late to file this year before the hearing, so we'll see what happens. We hope. I mean, the truth is the school board does decide policy. They don't decide values after the fact. They decide a policy, which I followed for 20 years, to tell you the truth. They can change that policy if they choose to. Right now, as the policy stands, I did exactly what the policy would tell me to do.
Okay. We also have comments dealing with this education on a broader sense, not just the community. In fact, one educator who disagrees with Cissy Lacks is J. Martin Rochester. He's a professor of political science at the University of Missouri at St. Louis and a recipient of an Emerson Electric Award for Excellence in Teaching. He wrote a commentary about the Cissy Lacks incident in the Post-Dispatch. We have a few quotes from that commentary. Now, the first one reads this way, and we can get some reaction. We'll talk with Cissy about this, and we'll have that coming up in just a minute. Okay, the first one is, the Lacks case shows there are now no standards in America's school. If a student can only function with four-letter words, not only is that student encouraged to rely on profanity, but the rest of kids must be subjected to such vocabulary as well. Now, Cissy, this deals again with a profanity issue and relying solely on that. You say you have an example that shows that you were finding a starting point and going from there. Let's deal with this example.
Yeah, his comments were interesting to me because I have a PhD. I'm clearly based in content, and I think it's really important that students produce something good. So the example that I'm showing you is of two poems that were written by a student within a 3-week period. I'm going to read the last poem that he wrote. It's called I'm All Alone. I'm all alone in this world today, no one to laugh with, no one to play. It's been like that since the age of 3, no one to love, care, or hold me. I guess that's why I'm the way I am. No one loved me, so I don't give a damn. No one to pick me up when I fall, no one to measure growth or how tall. Alone, how it hurts inside. If I were to die, no one would cry. I never gave a damn about any other. I love my shoes more than I love my mother. You might think I'm the devil or call me Satan. I have no love, I'm so full of hatin'. I guess that's why I have low self-esteem. The only time I show love is in my dreams. Now, this poem won several awards. I think it was read to the school board, and everybody said, oh, how wonderful, isn't this incredible, what the student can do as a 9th grader. But that is not the first poem that he wrote 3 weeks before. The first poem that he wrote, which I will censor in my reading for the television, it's called Hardcore Gangsta Pimp. G read, I went from happy to the curly who was on my, but I don't give a, the selling my weed with the speed, so ho though the R3 to the down with dope pimps, the believing hustler, never buster, and it goes on. I saw this poem, and people would say, or at least Marty Rochester would say, stop that poem. Tell him how horrible he is, how disgusting it is, don't use this profanity. I know as a teacher that I don't get to the last poem unless I allow him the privilege of writing the first poem, responding to him not with anything but a reaction, which in this case was, you have a lot of anger there. Anger is really useful. It's really powerful. You can do something with that anger. You can write in such a way that you can move people beyond anyone's expectations. Just go through the class with me, listen to all the possibilities for writing poetry, and choose what voice you want. After he goes through different lessons. 3 weeks later, we're not even talking about very much time, he comes up with this last poem that everybody is so proud of. He also is proud of it. He never meant, by the way, for this first poem to be read, to be seen, to be heard by people outside in the community, which is kind of the disturbing part about the tape that we're talking about too. Those students were beginning something. They didn't give permission. They didn't want people outside. Not that they were ashamed or afraid. It's their first work. They decide when they want something to be their final work. So getting from step 1 to step 2 to step 3, that's a teacher's job. And I would suggest somebody with really good credentials, who's been through this process for 20 years, who has award-winning students, knows what this process is. And it's a little embarrassing, it would seem to me, for Marty Rochester, who doesn't know me, who's never been in the classroom, to talk about my standards or the standards of teachers with my credentials. I can't understand why he would do something like that.
Okay, we're not finished with him and with your response to that. Let's go to the next quote from the professor. We are pandering, he says, to the MTV generation when we constantly encourage students to speak from their experience, to tell us their stories, to use their language. Now, how do you respond to that?
Another insult to teachers and students, I really do believe. From time immemorial, students have been told that they should write from their experiences. Writers write from their experiences. Writers who win Pulitzer Prizes, like August Wilson, are writing from their experiences and the experiences around them. I don't know what you write from if you don't write from experiences. So it's a very good way for students to start. It allows them to explore their own world first and then go out to the rest of the world. So I think that anybody who says that would be telling the National Council of Teachers of English and every English teacher that the methods you've been told are good aren't good. And I don't know where his position is or what experiences he's had to be able to do that.
Okay, let's deal with one more quote. Again, this is all from a commentary that appeared in the Post-Dispatch. And here's the third quote that we lifted. It seems we are now paying for hand-holding, caregiving, cheerleading, spiritual soul-saving, moral development, psychotherapy, conflict resolution, and everything under the sun except academics. And that's dealing with where we are now in terms of the education system, getting away from dealing strictly with academics to something else that he considers apparently away from the primary purpose. How do you react to that?
Again, I think I don't know him, you know, but his position doesn't seem to me to be one that has very often been in the schools. It's a very complicated society now, very complicated cultures, and you really cannot separate academics from what's going on in the outside world. The two are intertwined. They're so closely intertwined now that there is no way to separate them. So people who have been teaching for a long time recognize the conflicts and the problems and the solutions and are trying to mix them with the curriculum. There is nothing wrong with that. Everybody's doing it in every profession. And it seems to me really strange to say, prepare students for a profession or for the outside world, and then keep them away from the outside world at the same time. It's not possible to do. Students aren't going to let us do it anyway. So I don't think the influence is MTV. It is media, it's technology. The students are more familiar with technology than I am. Well, they're going to use it. It's going to be profitable for them. I don't mean financially, but in their lives. There's nothing wrong with mixing the two. We're not in the 1950s anymore, and there's no reason not to use all the advancements that we have.
Speaking of the advancements, now you videotaped this. This is a common practice done in schools all over the country. This was taped in October, yet it did not come to board attention until January.
That's right.
Some people might ask, why the delay in that time? Why did it take so long to get to the board?
There were no parent complaints, there were no student complaints, there were no teacher complaints, there were no complaints. So we've been doing this kind of project at Berkeley High School for 3 years. This is the first year it was taped, but it's been performed before in public with adults seeing it. There was no problem. So that this came to be a problem is a very awkward situation. It's one student complaining about something having nothing to do with this tape. And when she wanted to get out of a class, this is a student I had for 3 years, I told her I thought maybe it's a good idea to get out of this elective class if she wants to. They wouldn't let her out. They would not do a schedule change for her. And I think they pushed her so far, she's in a little bit of an embarrassing situation. I say leave, she says okay, they say no. They kept pushing her, and she said, well, I don't know what she said for sure. Well, I don't want to be in a class where there's a tape like this. She had participated, she had been active, she liked what she was doing. So it's 3 months later that this happens, and the principal, without talking to me, without asking me about the student, without meeting with me, takes the tape out of a closet, and bingo, that's the end.
Okay, one quick question. How does it feel to go from being a doctor of English, a teacher of English, to being, in essence, a national celebrity to a certain extent, heroine or demon?
Yeah.
How do you view that?
Well, it's something because one day I'm teaching, And the next day, you have to remember, I've gone through this for a couple of months. The next day, I'm really nothing. I mean, I am sitting at home, and I'm not talking to the media about anything. So until a hearing starts, there's really nothing going on. In a way, it's good, because I get to talk about my philosophy and things that are really important to me, that have been important to me for 20 years. And people don't listen to teachers very much. So now I have the opportunity. On the other side, it's a pretty sad tale that I'm doing things that I think are wonderful, and my students are supporting me, and we think we're doing everything right, and someone comes and says, you know what you're doing isn't worth anything. As a matter of fact, you're worth firing. You're worth firing for all the good things you're doing. And then I'm on the air because of that conflict. It's the strangest feeling, really, that a person could have, I think. And I keep trying to balance the two, to keep grounded, you know, and so that's really my effort right now.
Okay. And we'll be back with some closing comments in just a minute. And very quickly, to close with Dr. Cissy Lacks. Cissy, do you find yourself in a strange position at this point, given everything that's happened?
Very strange, because I think I'm just teaching. You know, I'm just doing my job, doing what I think is best, and other people are saying so many other things about what I do that it's really hard to understand that I'm the same person. It's almost like an out-of-body experience, really.
And the process is far from over.
Process is far from over. I want my legacy, if I leave one, to be that I helped teachers, I helped students, and I helped education. So we're going to do whatever we can to make sure that that's the legacy that's left.
Thank you. We've been speaking with Dr. Cissy Lacks. That's all the time we have for on this Newsmakers for this week. I'm Steve Jankowski. Until next weekend, thanks for joining us.